Hey, you mentioned in the previous interview an encounter with an angelic visitation. Have you had any others besides that one?
Yes, I've had two in my life.
Two.
And so the first one I had was I was going through a divorce. I think I mentioned that in one of my earliest. This is my first divorce. It was before I moved into my friend's teepee for the summer.
Yes.
And so I was living in an unfinished house. And so the unfinished house had no windows in it and the roof was mostly finished. And so even though I was kind of going through the spiritual awakening stuff, I was still going through a divorce. And so I was living in this unfinished house. I remember in June, the clouds roll in, it starts raining. So I'm living in this house where the rain's coming in through the roof.
No fun.
And I'm just like really, really, really depressed. You know, life's falling apart. There's a hole in my roof. and life couldn't be any more miserable, you know. And so a couple of my buddies say, come on, let's go on a backpacking trip and a climbing trip. Let's go climb Mount Olympus, which is in the middle of the Olympic National Park. It's the highest peak in Washington State in the Olympic National Park. It's right square in the middle of the park. So it's not a technical climb, but it's definitely a slog to the top, and you needed to rope up and stuff like that.
Is it multi-day or is it single day?
Multi-day. We're going to be gone for like a week.
Okay.
And so we load up our gear and we get down, I think, like 10 miles south of town or something. And we stop for a sec and look in it and we go, where's the food? You know, where's the food we're supposed to pack? It was my job to put the food into the car. And, you know, I was so depressed I couldn't even remember to put the food in the car. So I had to drive back and get the food. And it's like, well, it didn't really matter because I was probably going to die anyway, right? That was kind of my frame of mind. And so we take off on this journey. We spent the first night at the parking lot at Mount St. Helens. I don't know if you've ever been to Mount St. Helens. It's a volcano that blew in the 1980s in Washington State, knocked all the trees down. So now it's a monument. And so we climbed Mount St. Helens. It's an easy hike up, and you can look down in the crater. It's really cool. But that night we stayed in the parking lot. We just slept in the car. And that night I remember an electrical storm moved in, and we were in the cloud that had the lightning in it, and it was exploding all around us. It was like one of the most intense nature things I've ever been through. Yeah, it's like we're in an electrical storm. And I thought, well, it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to die anyway, right? and so the next day I'm really depressed still on this journey. And we get to Mount Olympus. We get to the Ho River Valley. And if you've ever been into the Olympic National Forest, the trees in there are enormous. They're like 8, 10, 12 feet across. They're these old mammoths from the time gone by. You know, they're like these fairy tale trees, and it's just a magical forest. And so we start at the Ho River trailhead, and we hike up one night. I think it was 18 miles before we begin hiking up the mountain. So it was like a long hike in. And the first night we stay in a hut, and we go over what a prusik knot are in case you fall into a crevasse. You can climb up your rope. You know, it says, well, it doesn't really matter because I'm probably going to die anyway. and then the next day we get up really early, like I think well before it was light out, so we could get up and climb up the mountain. So we climb up Mount Olympus. We get about 3/4 of the way to the top, and the fog rolls in, and we can't see. So we're in a whiteout situation, and so we have to finish the remainder of our hike by reading instruments. We did it by compass, and I was just in the dark in the back of the roped up crew of 3. You know, it's like, and so we make it to the top. The last 100 feet to the top of the mountain is it's a 100-foot scramble. So it's not a technical climb, but you had to just kind of scramble your way up and then write your name on the little book that's in the coffee can up there. And so I was so bummed out and depressed that I didn't do the last 100 feet just because I couldn't be bothered. You know, it's like because I just wasn't into it. And so we turn around, go back down, and as we're going down across this one ice field, I post hole into a crevasse. And so what that means is that my leg punched all the way through an ice bridge, and I was up to my crotch, dangling with 1 foot over a crevasse, you know. And so it was just all symbolic, you know. It's like where my head was at and how I was feeling, like, okay, I was probably going to die and fall into a crevasse in there, right? And so we get down off the mountain. We successfully climb the mountain, and we're staying in this little hut. So they have these huts in in Olympic National Park where you can stay overnight. They don't have doors on them or anything, but they're just kind of open huts where you can toss a sleeping bag and sleep. So we're there. It's probably around late afternoon, and we're just reading stories and eating trail mix, and really tired after a long day's hike. And then it's getting close to sunset or dark, and then we hear in the distance someone is approaching us. And so, we watch this couple come up. It's not two, but it's four people. And they're an East German couple that had immigrated to Canada right before the wall came down in '88. So they were immigrants to Canada. They lived in Vancouver, BC, and they were going to go hike the mountain, right? The only thing is that they had walked from done the 18 miles that day from the parking lot to where we were at, and they weren't dirty. They looked like they just walked out of a fashion magazine.
Do they have supplies?
They had like backpacks, but they looked like they were really light. Just like the scene wasn't quite fitting. So there was a man, he was probably in his 30s, a woman in her 30s, and they had two kids. They had a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old girl. Right, you guys just walked 18 miles, looked fresh as can be, and now you're going to go hike this hike this mountain tomorrow, just the four of you. It's like, I'm going, you guys are nuts, because it took us 2 days to get up there, and we were like exhausted,
18 miles is,
Yeah, and so we talked to him, and one thing I remember about this woman, so I just lost my family, and I was really in the dumps and depressed, and now up comes this German family that is like the perfect family in my mind, and this woman was really attractive, and I remember she just kind of like I just kind of fell for her, and so I started talking to her in German. I didn't really speak German, but I wanted to try it out, It's like, and so then we kind of acknowledge everything, and they go up. The trail probably went another 200 yards or so. Went around a small curve. There was steep ravines on each side. The heather was really thick, and it's kind of on an incline before you hit where there's no trees anymore, where you can't camp. It's just all dirt and boulders and stuff. And so I remember going up there. I'm thinking, I don't know where they're going to find a place to camp. I mean, you can squeeze one tent in there, but not two, and not with like little kids and stuff. It's like, and so they go on their way, and it's getting kind of close to dark. And I thought, well, they're probably having a hard time finding a place to camp. So I'll just go up and invite them to come back with us. We can share the hut with them. And there's a place they can put their tent right here. That's fine. So I go up there, walk up around the bend, and I can't find them. They're not there. They are not there. There's no footprints. There's no place they could go, because there's a ravine on this side. There's a ravine on the other side. There's no footprints anywhere. They would have not gone up to above the treeless area because it's steep, it's boulders, there's no place to camp. It's like, so I'm going, something's not right here. And I kind of got a little panicked and a little nervous. And so I remember going back, hiking back into the hut, hop in my sleeping bag, and I said to my buddies, I said, I went up and checked on that German family. I couldn't find them anywhere. And I thought, maybe we should go take a look, just in case something bad didn't happen. And they both looked at me and said, "What German family?"
Huh?
Yeah, huh? It's like, wait a minute. The ones we were talking to, the three of us, so we were talking to them. And then I realized something was really weird. And so I kind of just let it drop, And so the next morning we get up really early, and we go, we're going to head out. And so I made one real quick stop back up to the trailhead to see if they were still there or not. And so, again, I couldn't find them. I couldn't find any sign of where they may have camped, like, where you would see a depression where a tent may have been. And so I just kind of let it go.
And your friends have no recollection of...
Yeah, yeah, that was weird. That was so weird. So I thought I was kind of... I thought, maybe my grief or something was kind of losing it or something, but that was too bizarre. That was way too bizarre. And so as we're going down this trail, we're going to hike 18 miles out in one day. And I just remember my depression lifted. And it not only lifted, but it lifted to a point of euphoria, to this point where I had gone through a personality change completely. So my personality that I had been over the last 5 years of this marriage was really heavy and kind of serious. And all of a sudden, I felt joy and enthusiasm and excited for living.
Brand new.
Brand new. And so the only thing I could come up with is that these German people were like my guardian angels and helped me through this like major like personality transformation. It was like one of the most coolest things I've ever been through.
Sounds amazing. Either that or like a tumor on the brain.
Yeah. So that was an incredible experience of like what I thought was a visitation from beyond the physical into the physical. So
very cool.
Very cool.
Very
Yeah.
cool.